Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We will be talking about Excel tools to unlock hidden PPC data. I'm Rachael. I'm a senior account analyst here at Hanapin. I blog on PPC Hero, and if you want to reach out to me, you can tweet at me at law_Rachael.
And I'm Krista Hsieh. I'm an account manager at Hanapin Marketing. I also blog for PPC Hero. You can tweet me, but I most likely will not tweet back.
So maybe tweet at PPC Hero instead of Krista. So who is Hanapin? I'm assuming if you're on this webinar, you know a little bit about us, but here's a quick refresher. We run the world's most popular PPC blog, which is PPC Hero, and conference, which is HeroConf. We will be in Austin April 16th through the 18th. If you want to come see us in real life, we would love to see you there. And we manage and optimize global paid search, paid social, display, you name it. We love it. And these are some of our clients. We work with many Fortune 500 companies. You can see we've got some big brands here: Weather Channel, Icelandair, Shoe Carnival. We love working with a diverse array of clients and industries. We love it all. Join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you today. If you want to tweet about today's webinar, include the hashtag ThinkPPC in your tweets so we can respond to you. Or if you'd rather use the webinar question box to send us your questions, we will be addressing those at the end of the presentation in the Q&A section. So we have our first live poll question. How long have you been in PPC? Less than 1 year, 1 to 3. I personally have been here at Hanapin for just over 4 years, so I've been doing this quite a while. Wow. Went through from a client-facing position to the account analyst role, where I do more of the nerdy stuff. Krista, how about you?
I've been at Hanapin a little over a year. So I started as a production associate, total noob to PPC, and have learned a lot, and now I'm an account manager.
Fun stuff. We should have a lot of things for the newbies and the more experienced folks here today. So we have our poll result in. It looks like 31% are less than 1 year and 26% 5+ years. So we have a lot of veterans here today. And then 27% 1 to 3 years. So we got a good mix of people here today. Great. So here's our agenda for today, just some broad overview of what we'll be talking about. So we will discuss how to get your data report ready, some analysis within Excel, and troubleshooting any pesky errors or issues that you are having. So we'll start our first section with getting your data report ready. So many times you download your data from AdWords, Bing, Facebook, whatever your platform is, and it's not always in a really nice, easy to pivot and or formatable format. So not only you want your data in a format that you can pivot and that you want to pivot. So we'll go through an example here. One function in Excel that I like to use to make things easily pivotable, we here at Hanapin, we like to have a campaign naming convention here. So if you look in this screenshot, the campaign names are category underscore subcategory underscore geo. And we want to pivot maybe by subcategory. So we use the text to column function here to split out the campaign into its categories. So here we have our original campaign name on the left, and then on the right, this is what we get after running that text to columns function. And we want to pivot based on this category here. So that's why we ran the text to columns, so just bust that out. And here we can see what our pivot looks like, or one option of a pivot that we can run based on that category. We can easily sum up our clicks, impressions, whatever metrics you want to throw in here based on that category from all that lovely campaign data that you've got. VLOOKUP. So this is great if you are merging data sources. So sometimes we have to match up analytics data with AdWords or Bing Again, lots of cross-platform data that we need to mash up. So in this example, we pulled our campaigns with some analytics data, and we need to look up the label that is from the AdWords interface. So this VLOOKUP formula looks a little daunting, but that's okay, because we're going to break it down. So your first criteria here is the lookup value. So that's just what you want Excel to look for on the other sheet. The table is just where you're looking. Again, that will be the other sheet. Column index number. So this is the column that you want to return. If on your other sheet you have campaign in column A and the label in column B, you want to select both column A and B. And then for a column index number, you would put a 2 here because you want to return that label that's in column 2. And the range lookup, this is a true or false criteria. False means you're looking for an exact match. True will just look for something that's kind of close. You probably don't want to do that. I always use false. When in doubt, just use false. An index match is a great alternative to VLOOKUP. So if you have a huge workbook with loads and loads of data, and you don't want to have to select all that data for Excel to search through, or if you have more than one criteria that you need to match up, index match will be your friend. So here's an example. So on the left, this is our data. We have letter, number, and clicks. And then over on the right, we have what we need to look up. So we have a letter and a number. And we want to return the number of clicks that letter-number combo returned. So we nest our match function within the index. So first you'll select what you want to return, the clicks, and then you put in your match function. And when you want to use more than one criteria, you can just append them together with that ampersand, the and sign, in both the lookup criteria and then where you're looking. But if you are going to do this with the 2 criteria, you need to make this into an array. So the array, if you'll see at the bottom, are those curly brackets around the entire formula before the equal sign. That means it's an array. If you're on a Mac, you can do this by pressing Command-Shift-Return when you have that formula selected. There is an equivalent on PC. I don't remember what it is. I apologize. But I'm sure you know how to use Google, right? And then this is just a quick breakdown of how the match function itself works. So this will return a number corresponding to the position of the matched cell. Again, this sounds like nothing, but here's an example. So here we want to, over the example on the right, we want to look for the number 13 out of that data that we have selected. And this formula will return the number 4 since 13 is in position 4. It's the 4th cell down in that array that we have selected. So when we use this within the index function, this is telling us which row or column to pull in. Again, this is a little confusing, but if you practice it, you'll get the hang of it. I believe in you.
So you can use concatenate when you want to combine 2 different cells together into one. So the way you can do that, or if you don't include a space or a symbol to separate the 2 different the text from the 2 different cells, it'll just mash them right together with no spaces in between.
Gross.
Totally. Who wants that? So that's why in this formula we have our first cell that we want to bring in, and then we have in quotations the symbol that we want to separate them with, and then we have our add group, which is the second cell that we want to combine it with. So, and then you can see on the bottom that's the finished product. One reason that I've used this in the past, there's a lot of different ways and reasons to use concatenate, but one reason is if you have a lot of ad group data and you need to see the campaign and the ad group at the same time, that table on the left, the pivot table, is what it would look like if you did not concatenate the data beforehand. So I think that's just a harder way for your eye to kind of analyze the data. But if you can concatenate them and just pull it in so you can kind of read from left to right, it's just easier to analyze and kind of see how things are performing.
This is also great if you want to use a VLOOKUP instead of that index match matching the two criteria. If you just want a VLOOKUP, you can go ahead and mash that campaign and ad group together in both sources and then use your VLOOKUP that way, if that's how you want to flow.
Perfect.
Whatever floats your boat, man. So now we'll talk a little bit about cell formatting and some issues that can pop up. Things can sometimes get a little bit wonky in Excel if you're just not using the right format for your cells. So here we go. So the trim function will remove all spaces from a cell besides the spaces between words. So it will leave those. But sometimes if you're pulling data from a particular platform, it will have spaces at the end of the text in the cell. And if one cell doesn't have the spaces and another does, like it won't pivot right, and it just doesn't quite work very well. So the trim function will go ahead and clean that up for you, and it'll make sure everything's uniform. Oh, also another thing to note here is that if you're writing ad copy and you have extra spaces in there, that'll, eat away at your character count if you have weird hidden things in there. So the clean function, this isn't one that we have to use all that often, but it will remove all non-printable characters from your data. Again, I've seen instances where we've downloaded ad copy or keywords from a platform and it has really weird symbols in it and it just doesn't work for what we're trying to do. Or if we're trying to upload ad copy and we want to make sure that we don't have any of those weird things that the platform will reject, this is a great way to clean that up. It will also remove line breaks if you have those in your cell. Go ahead and use the clean function to get rid of that line break. Although, just take note in the example here, it doesn't put a space in between. So just be aware that it will do that. The text function will format a cell. So you just select the cell that you want to format, and then you can put in, however you need it to be formatted. What do you know? We use this a lot here for dates. So in Google Sheets particularly, if we're using query functions, it will only accept dates in this year, month, day format. I haven't seen that as a real common one that's like downloaded into your data. So if you do need to change that and you don't want to go through the menus in Excel to actually change that, you can use this formula. Now we'll go to analysis with if functions. We love ifs.
Yes, if statements. So you can think of if functions like a simple if statement. So basically, if statements are defined as functions that if a certain set of criteria is met, then it will do one thing, and if that criteria is not met, it will do something else. So we can think about it in terms of if it's true, it'll do this. If it's false, it'll do something else. And that's it.
Easy peasy.
We're going to cover 5 different types of if statements today, and we're going to kind of walk through before we go over the formula how we would describe them maybe logically in words. So for the first if, basically it's saying if this happens, then show me that, or then do that.
Super simple.
Super easy. Next would be if error. So basically you're just saying if there's an error, then I want to see this or I want to do this. Some if is just saying if this criteria is met, then sum these. And some ifs is just a little different. So instead of one criteria, there can be several criteria. So if all those criteria are true, then sum these. An average if is just like the sum if, except instead of summing, you're averaging.
You're probably noticing a trend here. The name says what it does.
Classic if. So we're going to just walk through the most basic if statement, the if. So,
dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. One way that we use these is if we are creating like a bid sheet. And so in this example, all we're saying is if our impression share is less than 50%, then we want to multiply our max CPC by 0.1 or 10%. And if our impression share is greater than 50%, then we don't want to see any change. So, did you have something you wanted to add, Rachel?
I was just going to mention that if you wanted to change your bid, if it is greater than 50%, instead of putting that no change in there on the end, you can nest another if at the end and just keep doing ifs, as many as you want. Well, there is a limit, but it's a lot. You probably won't hit it.
You can if almost for eternity, but not quite. So yeah, in this example, we're just saying if column D is less than 50, then we want to multiply column C, or that cell C4, by 0.1. And if not, we just want to see no change. Or be fancy and nest your ifs. The if error always comes in handy for me because I hate seeing those error messages pop up in my Google Sheet.
It's ugly. Clients get confused by it. No one likes it.
It's stressful. It's just got to get rid of that. So especially if I'm passing on a doc to a client or to a colleague, I found it easier to just use an if error. So in this example, we were looking at which keywords are we using in Google that we aren't currently using in Bing. So using the VLOOKUP example, our VLOOKUP formula that Rachel walked us through earlier, we just nested that inside an if error and then told it if the VLOOKUP doesn't find anything, instead of showing us an ugly error symbol, we just want to see the word missing. So this is just a really easy way to make something client-facing and easy to understand. Yeah.
And now we'll talk about sum if. So again, this is super simple. We just want to look for this criteria, and if it's true, then sum it. So in this particular example here, though, we have some wildcards in here. So you'll see in our formula that we have put these wildcards around cell H3. So this asterisk means that anything can come before or after this word that we're looking for. So here we're looking to sum all the cost for all of the queries that contain the word cheap. We don't care if it's at the beginning, end, or middle, all of the queries. If, for example, we wanted to only sum up the cost for queries that started with the word cheap, we would remove that first asterisk and keep the one that's after it. Asterisk is a tongue twister, if anyone was wondering. So yeah, that's a sum if. Pretty basic, but really useful. And here's our results from that sum if. So sum ifs with an S, we're plural here. The main difference here is that the range that you are summing comes first in your formula, and then you put all of your criteria sets. Where the regular sum if, your criteria came first, and then your sum came after. So here's an example of a sum ifs. One thing to note here is that if you forget and you mix up the order of your formula and it's just not working, go back and make sure you have things in the right order, because I've seen that happen lots of times. So here's our actual example of sum ifs. So we want to sum the cost, so we put that in first, and then we put in our criteria. Here we're matching up device and keyword for specific phrases. So here we want to see all the queries, or all the keywords that have greenhouse in them versus carport, and then we want to break it down by device. And here's our results.
Look at that table, so nice. And lastly, we're going to talk about the average if, which, as you can imagine, averages a column of data. So basically all this does is, like the sum if, it takes into consideration the range, and then based on a criteria, if that criteria is met, it'll give you the average. So similar to our previous example, here all we're saying is look in the device column, and if it's mobile, we want to see the average of the cost. So pretty simple, just an easy, quick way to get a higher view of what's our average cost for mobile. You can use it for anything, keyword, keyword type, match type. Anything.
Super simple stuff. Pivot tables.
Yay, PPC's best friend. So you can use pivots when, well, I use pivots every day, so you can use them for really anything, but mostly when data is too big for Excel's filtering option. So if you have rows and rows of data and it's just too much to see in the filtered option, then pivots are a great resource. Also, if you want to look at one category with multiple metrics, then pivots are your best friend. Some common PPC pivot tables are listed here. I use them a lot for search query reports, placement reports, geographic analysis, and day-of-week analysis. But really, it's kind of like the if your option
do anything.
So if you aren't sure where to find a pivot, then you can find it in the Excel, that top navigation bar.
The ribbon.
Yes, the ribbon under the Insert tab. And if you're feeling really crazy, you can let Excel build your recommended table.
It's not great most of the time. I've tried it a few times. I've clicked it on accident.
Me too.
It's usually not the pivot that you want.
It's not the best. But, you know, whatever floats
Why not?
I guess.
Try it out.
Yeah, for this example, we just use regular. So we're going to walk through pivots for search queries. And if you are anything like me, then you feel like this. That might be a bit exaggerated.
Not exaggerated at all. I sit by Krista. I've seen her do that in real life.
Get really stoked. This is just a quick example of how to set up a pivot table builder for a search query analysis. So you just want your search terms to be in your rows. And then for the values, it's really just what is important to your account. So for this example, I wanted to look at cost conversions and then cost per conversion. And I always like to filter for added and excluded just to make sure that I'm not looking at things that we've already excluded or things that we've intentionally added. And then I usually filter by match type to get rid of exact match.
And just remember that for formulas like cost per conversion, cost per click, when you're building your pivot, you will want to add that as a calculated field. Don't just take, you know, the average of CPA that's from your data. You'll want to actually calculate that or else it will be wrong.
Yes.
We don't like wrong data.
That's very important. And again, just similarly, make sure you filter for what's important for your account. So in this example, to start with, when I start with the search query analysis, I usually start by looking kind of top level, what is converting, and here what's spending and not converting. So here I'm just filtered by cost and then looking at everything that's spending but not converting. And this is what you end up with. And from here you can, just analyze the results and determine, is this something you can exclude or something that just needs to be optimized a little better.
And from here, I'll usually start with this sort of high-level pivot. And then once I get a feel for what I want to actually make changes on in the account, I'll go ahead and add maybe campaign or ad group to this pivot to see, okay, like this top query, it needs to be excluded, but I don't know where I need to exclude it. So that would be kind of the next step after this.
Perfect. And this is really similar if you wanted to run a geographic analysis, instead of that search term there, to just throw the region in the rows, and then you can analyze how those are performing. And this is just an example of what that would look like. And
this makes me laugh every time.
If you ever need to create fancy pivot tables, whether it be client-facing or something you want to use internally, or maybe you just like looking at pretty things, I get that. Then here are some ways that you can create some better looking pivot tables. So in the pivot table, if you click into, I think you click into field settings, and then you can change your rows or your columns to be formatted in a way that's easier on the eyes. So for example, in the cost column, I always like to change that to something with a $. Accounting, that's what it's called.
I like accounting or currency.
Yes.
Either one. I prefer accounting because it kind of puts a space between the $sign and the number.
I prefer currency.
Small differences.
Nuance. Oh,
you do you, though. You
currency.
You pick whatever number you want.
And then another way to just make these really easier to read or just more appealing is to add a heat map to the pivot table. As Rachel likes to say, don't add too many or it'll look like you vomited heat map.
Rainbow vomit.
Yes. So, choose wisely. Don't go crazy.
And you also have to, think about the end user. Who are you sending this to? Mm-hmm. We've had clients that really hate, for whatever reason, the heat mapping. They say, don't send me this. I hate it. So, just think about who will be looking at this.
So this is, an example of our cost for column formatted, as well as the heat map added to our cost per conversion. You can see it just draws the eye to where our highest cost per conversion is. So if you are sending it to a client or a colleague, it will just quickly allow them to identify this is where our highest CPA is.
You can also do custom rules here. So if you only want to highlight the ones that are over your cost per conversion goal, you can set to only highlight greater than whatever your number is if you don't want to do the full rainbow.
And this is just, we started on the left with nothing formatted and then ended on the right with something that just looks a little cleaner, easier to read, fancier.
Look at all those decimals. No one likes that.
You do not want that.
It's so confusing. All right, and this is an example that I use for my projections for an account that I have. So we have our formulas to set up to automatically do those projections for us based on our last 7 days and month-to-date spend. So all we have to do is dump in the data from the different platforms, and then this does everything else. Those formulas at the top, the dates, those are all formulas, so I never have to change this. It's really awesome. And then we have some heat mapping here on the percent to goal. And I actually share this with the client, and it makes it really easy for them to see, okay, we're underpacing here, but we're a little over in this category, so let's, reallocate some budget, whatever we need to do there.
This is a nice table.
Thank you. I worked hard on it. All right, so now we'll go into correlation. So you all know this formula by heart, right? I mean, I write it all the time.
Every day.
It's my favorite. Look how pretty it is. Just kidding. Excel will do this for you, luckily, so you don't have to manually do this formula every time you want to look at correlation. How nice is that?
Ooh.
Thanks, Excel. So here we have two sets of data. We have sessions from our Facebook ads and goal completions from our direct traffic. So this is pulled from analytics. And we want to see if these two things are related. Are our social ads driving direct traffic, and are those people converting? So we just use the correlation function here, and then select both data sets. Not too complicated.
Easy peasy.
And the correlation function will spit out a number that's between -1 and 1. So +1 is a perfect positive correlation, and -1 is a perfect negative correlation. So here I have some graphs and some dummy data just to show you what that actually means for all of you without a math or statistics background, which is probably a lot of people. So the perfect positive correlation, you'll notice in our data set, B is always A multiplied by 2. So when we graph this, we see that A and B move together. When A increases, B is going to increase. But with the perfect negative correlation, B is always -2 of what A is. So when A goes up, B is going to go down, and they move opposite. So in our example, if as Facebook traffic increases and our direct conversions also increase and they move together, this function will tell you that, and that number corresponds to how correlated they are. You probably won't ever have a perfect correlation, either positive or negative, but again, it'll show you kind of on the scale of where those two things align. And that's that. Now we'll talk about troubleshooting all of your Excel woes. So these are some common errors. Don't get stressed out by looking at them. I know it makes me a little stressed when I see errors.
It makes me sweat a little.
But we're going to hopefully help you fix it. So the first one here is just the value error. So this is a really nice general error for something is wrong. Don't know what, Excel's not going to tell you specifically. Something's wrong. To fix it, I usually recommend just double checking your formula here and all of the cells that it's referencing to make sure you didn't goof up somewhere when you were building your formula. This can be, I've seen this one where if we're trying to nest like a million different if functions and just one little error will throw the whole thing off. So Really, you just have to double check it. I don't have a great answer for this one, but
that was a perfect answer.
The next one is your NA error. So this is just when the formula can't find what it's been asked to look for. Like we talked about before with the VLOOKUP or the index match, if it just doesn't exist in that sheet that you're looking in, it will just give you this NA error, or not applicable. So to fix this, double check that it actually doesn't exist where you're looking for it. If it does and your formula just isn't finding it, something's probably a little off with your formula. If it really doesn't exist though, you can just wrap this in an if error, and then you can just get rid of your error. You can either do quotes with nothing in between to leave a blank cell, or you can put, you know, just whatever you want. Anything. It's up to you.
For the reference error, which is that hashtag ref, this is happening when a formula is referring to a cell that's not there anymore, it's not valid. So this happens most often when cells are formulas referencing cells that have gotten deleted or they've maybe been pasted over. So a quick fix is just to double check your formula, make sure that you're referencing cells that still exist. That's important. And an easy way, if you are trying to, maybe you're wanting to get rid of some of those columns of data so that it's just a simpler looking sheet, if you still need that formula, to just copy the formula and paste it as values only, and then you can go ahead and delete this columns or rows that the formula was referencing without throwing that error. And next is the name error. So this just means that there's a typo in the formula name, or it's missing quotation marks, or for text values, or like maybe a colon was omitted in a range. So you just need to double check your formula for typos and make sure that everything's all squared away there, and that should go away.
That one means you done goofed up. You need to fix your formula.
And lastly is divide by 0, which, oops, you can't do that. So instead of the universe imploding, Excel will just give you an error. So maybe you could try wrapping your formula in an if error like we talked about earlier, so that you don't see that ugly divide by 0 error.
Yeah, this one usually pops up if we're calculating click-through rate, conversion rate, and you've got zeros in there. Excel doesn't like that, but that's all right. So if your formula isn't giving you an error, but it's returning the wrong values, whoops, that's not good. First step is to just QA, go back and look at your formula again. I find that something that really helps the neatness of your Excel workbook is to name your columns. So if you select all your columns and from the ribbon there's an option to name them, that way you can, instead of just referencing, you know, cells B2 through 100, you can just type in clicks or campaign name or whatever your column is titled, and that will help you troubleshoot when you do have errors. So make sure you've got the right columns and rows selected. Are you using your wildcards correctly? You know, sometimes people forget how to use those or they just accidentally leave one out. Just double check that. And are you using the right formula? Again, an example that comes to mind is some if and some ifs. Just, you know, think it through. Tricky. And then check that the values are actually wrong. I've definitely had days where I do something in an Excel and I'm like, that doesn't seem right. That's way too high or way too low. And then I check it manually and it is right. So QA, people, it's worth it. So if you want to know more about Excel, lucky you, we have an Excel extravaganza. How fun does that sound?
So fun.
Woo. It is December 2017, so that is right around the corner. So we will have 3 different webinars in Excel, Excel white papers, and more. So we'll be doing pivot tables, what if analysis, automated bidding. There's tons of cool stuff, you guys. We love Excel. We want to help you learn Excel if you're not so comfortable with it. We love talking about this stuff, so I hope you join us in December. Mark your calendars. So, if you do want to attend the Excel extravaganza, that sounds so fun.
So I'm going to be there.
I think everyone should wear party hats at the Excel extravaganza. So, if you would like to be notified, select option A here. Or if you just want to stay up to date on Hanapin's conference, HeroConf, which is in Austin from April 16 through 18. HeroConf is a great time if you haven't been. It's a great way to learn new things, brush up on things you've forgotten about. The industry changes so fast. It's also a great networking opportunity. You know, I went to Philly and I got to meet tons of cool PPC people and expand my knowledge base, so I think it's definitely worth the trip to Austin. Plus, I hear Austin's really cool, so.
And I hear HeroConf is super fun, so also.
It is, it's super fun. There's a bar takeover, there's lots of after-hours activities. It's a fun time. You can have both, or if you don't want anything, no thanks. But we hope you want something. Okay. And now we will go to Q&A. So let's see what we got. So we have a question about adding CPC as a calculated field for pivot tables. Sure. So when you're building your pivot table, say you have AdWords data and you want to pull in CPC, when you add that metric to your pivot table, it will, I think it averages the CPCs, but you don't want to average them all, you want to actually calculate it. So if you're grouping by, say, label, you want to actually calculate what the CPC is for that label and do your cost divided by click instead of using the weird average that Excel will give you. It'll just be a little off. It won't be quite accurate. And our second question is, do you have a list of projection formulas? So I usually use a normalized projection. So we do your month-to-date cost or whatever metric you want to project plus your last 7 days divided by 7 to get your daily cost. And then you take that number and multiply it by how many days are left in the month. And then you add that to your month-to-date to get your projected cost. I feel like that one's a little hard to explain without a visual, so if you need help, just tweet at us and we'll get you a better explanation. All right, I think that is all we have for today. Thank you so much for attending. Again, tweet #ThinkPPC at us. You can contact us directly at marketing@hanapinmarketing.com. We hope to see you at HeroConf. Stay tuned for the Excel Extravaganza in December. And thank you so much.
Bye, guys.